This was the first time I saw a son take his father to court, not for violence, not for neglect, but for blackmail. A family collapsing, piece by piece, inside a courtroom. My name is Elias Blackwood. I've served as a judge for over 30 years. Thousands of cases, some loud, some silent. A few, unforgettable. This one still follows me. Pushpin: all names in this story have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. But everything else happened exactly as I'll tell it. It started on a Monday. The kind of Monday where the rain feels personal, like it's trying to crawl under your coat. I remember because the courthouse heater was broken, and my coffee went cold before I even touched the first file. That file? Case #3421B, Keller vs. Keller. A 17-year-old boy suing his father. The charge? Blackmail. I blinked twice. Thought it was a mistake. And then I saw the counterclaim, the father accusing the son of the same thing. 2 accusations. Same bloodline. Mirror images of pain. Court opened at 10 a.m. Lucas Keller, the son, sat at the plaintiff's table. Tall. Slim. Wearing a blazer over a hoodie like he couldn't decide who he was supposed to be today. His mother, Sarah, sat behind him, pale, holding a tissue in both hands. Daniel Keller, the father, sat on the other side. Mid-40s. Perfect suit. No expression. No eye contact. They didn't look at each other. Not once. Lucas took the stand. His voice was calm, but tight. Like someone used to holding back. He said, "My father told me, if I didn't start sending him money, he'd tell people something I wasn't ready for them to know." I leaned in. "What was that, Lucas?" Lucas looked straight ahead. His voice dropped. "That I'm trans. He said he'd tell everyone, my friends, my teachers, even my mom." The air changed. He went on. He didn't want a lump sum. Just little bits, taken from the account my grandmother left me. $150 here. $300 there. He paused. I gave it to him. Because he's my dad. I asked, "Did you use the money for yourself?" Lucas nodded. Some of it. Clothes. A train ticket to see a friend. Someone who understood. Then he said the line that's never left me. "I just wanted to feel like I was still allowed to live." And that was only half the story. Next, it was Daniel Keller's turn. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the stand like a man who'd rehearsed this in the mirror. Every movement seemed intentional, calm, collected. But too calm, like someone hiding tremors under his skin. Once seated, I began with the usual. "State your full name for the record." He did, voice low and even. Then I asked, "You've heard your son's testimony. What is your response?" There wasn't even a blink. "My son found something he shouldn't have," he said. "An old phone. I kept it in a box in the garage, forgot it even existed." He paused. Let the silence sit for a second too long. There were messages on it. Photos. Things I'm not proud of. Things that happened a long time ago. He shifted in his chair. Looked down. Looked back up. "I had an affair. Years ago. I never told my wife. I thought it was over. Buried. But that phone, it told the whole story." He swallowed. Lucas found it. And suddenly, everything changed. He said Lucas didn't yell. Didn't cry. He came to me like a lawyer. Said, "You owe me. If I tell Mom, it'll ruin her. You want that?" Daniel's voice stayed level, but his knuckles had gone white. I thought he was bluffing. But then, He started naming amounts: $200, $300. Every few weeks. He looked directly at me. I gave him the money. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't scared of Lucas. I was scared of what the truth would do to Sarah. His eyes flicked toward his wife, sitting stiff behind their son. I loved her. Still do. I just made a mistake I didn't know how to fix. I asked him, "Did you ever threaten your son?" He hesitated. No. I told him, if he wanted to act like an adult, then adult choices come with adult consequences. I tilted my head. Sounds like a warning. Maybe, he said. But it wasn't meant as a threat. It was the truth. He turned slightly in the chair, glancing again at his son. I don't know who he is anymore. We used to go hiking. Sunday breakfast. Now he just watches me like I'm an opponent. His voice cracked, the first time emotion crept in. I made a mistake. But I'm still his father. At that moment, I noticed Lucas shifting uncomfortably. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. And Daniel, for all his control, looked the same. They weren't enemies. They were just two people staring at the wreckage between them, trying to convince the court who dropped the first match. After Daniel's testimony, I requested a brief recess. I needed air. The courtroom felt tighter than usual. Outside, I stood under the overhang as rain whispered down the marble steps. Two people. Same blood. Two stories. No certainty. What struck me most wasn't who said what. It was how little either of them seemed to believe they could ever go back. When I returned, I asked Daniel one last question. If your son had never found that phone, do you think you would have told the truth? He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said. I don't know. But I know I would have kept trying to be his hero. I wrote that line down in my notebook. And underlined it. Twice. Because heroes don't need to be perfect. But blackmailers? They don't get to wear capes. Court resumed after lunch. The coffee had gone stale, the lighting had dimmed just enough to make everything feel heavier, and the silence in the room, it was no longer from politeness. It was tension. Real, living, breathing tension. I called the first witness, Sarah Keller, Lucas's mother, Daniel's wife, or perhaps, former wife. The record didn't clarify. She took the stand quietly. Her hands trembled as she held them in her lap, and she didn't look at either of them, not her son, not her husband. She looked at me. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? The bailiff asked. I do, she whispered. Mrs. Keller, I said gently, were you aware of the alleged blackmail occurring between your husband and your son? She blinked. Slowly. No. Not at first. When did you find out? The night Lucas ran away. That changed the room. Lucas's head dropped. Daniel straightened. I pressed gently, can you explain? She nodded. Eyes still fixed on the floor. He left a note. Said he needed space. That he didn't feel safe. I called everyone. Police. Friends. Then I found a receipt on the kitchen counter, for a wire transfer. To Daniel? She nodded. And that's when you suspected something? I didn't want to believe it, she said. I confronted Daniel. He said it was for expenses. But then I found the old phone. Her voice broke. I never looked at it. I couldn't. I knew what it meant. I just couldn't confirm it. She glanced at Lucas. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I thought I was protecting him. I thought I was being a good mother. Lucas didn't look up. But his hands curled into fists. Daniel, for the first time, looked shaken. Next, I called Oliver March, Lucas's former best friend. He was tall, awkward, maybe 16. The kind of kid who always wore a backpack, even when he didn't need to. He sat down, wiped his palms on his jeans, and cleared his throat. I used to be friends with Lucas. We don't really talk anymore. Why not? I asked. I don't know. I guess, things got weird. I gave him a moment. Tell us what you remember. Oliver looked down at his hands. There was this weekend. I remember because it was raining like crazy. Lucas showed up at my place and said he couldn't go home. Why? He said, his dad found something out about him. Something personal. And he was scared that Daniel might use it. Did he say the word blackmail? Oliver hesitated. No. But he said something I won't forget. What was it? Oliver looked up. He said, it's like owing money to someone who used to tuck you in at night. That line hit hard. The courtroom shifted again. The kind of silence that isn't just absence of sound, but the echo of something honest. Lucas's shoulders sank. Sarah closed her eyes. Daniel looked straight ahead, unmoving. I didn't write that line down. I didn't need to. It was already branded into my memory. Then came Daniel's sister, Rachel, a fireball of confidence and opinion. Mid-40s, sharp cheekbones, sharp tongue. I'll tell you right now, she said before I asked a question, Lucas has always known how to get what he wants. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Manipulation, she said, without blinking. Even as a child. He'd play one parent against the other. Get in trouble and make it sound like someone else's fault. Do you believe he's capable of blackmail? Absolutely, she said. Especially if he thought it would hurt my brother. Her statement hung in the air like smoke. Uncomfortable. Hard to breathe through. I glanced at Lucas. His jaw was tight, but he said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest protest of all. The last witness that day was Mr. Brennan, the school counselor. He was older, quiet, the kind of man who wore sweaters even in summer. He held a notebook but never opened it. Lucas came to me a lot, he began. Not always with words. Sometimes just to sit in the office and exist without noise. I asked, did he ever mention family problems? He didn't have to. What do you mean? Mr. Brennan looked at me. His posture. His tone. The way he flinched when someone spoke too loudly. That's the language of someone living with pressure. I nodded slowly. Did he ever mention blackmail? Once. Indirectly. He said, it's strange being afraid of someone who says they love you. At the end of the day, I returned to Chambers with more questions than answers. Was Lucas manipulating his father? Or was he a teenager pushed to survive? Was Daniel protecting his marriage? Or protecting a secret? Every story came with its own truth. And mine, the judge's truth, had yet to take shape. That evening, the courtroom lights dimmed. The crowd thinned. But I remained, seated in my chair, staring at the transcript, page after page, hoping it would start speaking to me louder than the voices in my head. The facts didn't line up. Or maybe, they lined up too perfectly. That's always the danger, when both sides sound just believable enough. I needed a sounding board. So I called for a private conference. My advisors, Maya and Daniel, met me in Chambers around 6 p.m. Maya, my legal aid, had a mind like a scalpel, sharp, precise, often cutting deeper than expected. Daniel, my clerk, was the opposite, more intuitive, emotional, sometimes impulsive. I liked the contrast. Truth usually lived somewhere between their opinions. Maya opened first. This case isn't about money, she said. It's about control. About narrative. I raised an eyebrow. Lucas is vulnerable, she continued. But he's not stupid. He knows how to weaponize pain. Learned it from somewhere. She paused, then added, probably from his father. Daniel jumped in. No, it's deeper than that. Lucas isn't manipulating anyone. He's surviving. That kid's been cornered for years. You heard what the counselor said. They started arguing. Softly at first. Then louder. Maya, just because someone's hurt doesn't mean they're innocent. Daniel, and just because someone looks calm doesn't mean they're right. I raised my hand. Enough. I turned to the whiteboard behind my desk. Split it in two. Daniel. Former affair. Gave money. Denies threats. Says he panicked. Lucas. Hid identity. Claimed threats. Took money. Possibly demanded more. Then, in the middle, I wrote one word. Silence. Because that's what this case was really about. Not the affair. Not the money. Not the blackmail. Silence, used as a tool. A weapon. A currency. Maya leaned over. Judge, she said, have you ever seen a parent sue a child and still hope they win? I looked at her. Every time, I said. Because they're not hoping to win. They're hoping to be forgiven. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in chambers. I reread every line of testimony. Every hesitation. Every emotional flicker between the words. Then I opened a blank page in my notebook. Not for legal notes. But something else. A letter I'd never send. A thought I needed to write before it faded. It read. Sometimes love mutates. Becomes conditional. Transactional. Strategic. But underneath all that, there's still a boy who wanted a father. And a father who wanted to be more than his mistake. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I circled the word, underneath. The next morning, I arrived before the sun. The halls were empty. My footsteps echoed louder than usual. As I sat down at the bench, I didn't feel ready. Not yet. So I did what I rarely do. I asked for closing statements. Lucas stood. Hands shaking, voice steady. I'm not here to ruin my father, he said. I just want it to stop. The silence. The games. The way we pretend we're okay. He looked toward Daniel. I didn't blackmail you. I confronted you. I was scared, and I didn't know how else to keep myself safe. He turned back to me. I don't hate him. I just don't trust him. Then he sat down. Daniel stood next. Calmer than before. Not cold, just tired. He's not the boy I raised, he said. He's angry. Reckless. He crossed lines. He looked at Lucas. But maybe I crossed them first. He turned to me. I don't want him punished. I want him to understand. I asked, understand what? Daniel's voice was almost a whisper. That I'm human. And that I've spent every day since trying not to be the worst version of myself. There it was again. Not guilt. But longing. Like he was asking for permission to rebuild something neither of them had language for. I recessed the court for final deliberation. Back in chambers, the silence pressed against me. This case wasn't just about legality. It was about legacy. What kind of relationship survives when both sides are armed with secrets? As I prepared my final judgment, I wrote one more note in the corner of my legal pad. You can't undo betrayal with money. You can't rewrite trust with silence. But maybe, just maybe, you can start over with the truth. Court reconvened just after noon. The gallery was half full, a few journalists, quiet observers, and two strangers who sat near the back like they'd wandered in from another case but couldn't bring themselves to leave. Lucas sat motionless. Daniel kept his hands folded tightly in front of him. Sarah sat between them, eyes on the floor, as if bracing for impact. And me? I took a long breath. Then I read the ruling. Having heard all testimonies, reviewed all evidence, and considered the emotional and psychological context. Pause. This court finds that neither party is legally guilty of blackmail in the criminal sense. There was a rustle in the gallery. But I wasn't done. However, I continued, this case does not lack harm. It lacks language. I looked up at them. This wasn't a crime of extortion. It was a collapse of boundaries, born from secrecy, sustained by silence, and fueled by fear. Daniel lowered his head. Lucas didn't move. I continued. The court orders 12 months of court-supervised family therapy, facilitated by licensed professionals, to begin within 30 days. And during this period, I added, no direct financial transfers, written or verbal accusations, or retaliatory contact shall occur without mediation. Lucas blinked. Daniel's jaw clenched. Sarah let out a slow breath, the kind you don't realize you've been holding for years. I wasn't finished. I also request, not order, but request, that both parties write a statement before the end of the year. Not for legal record. Not for the court. But for each other. A truth. A regret. A memory. Something human. I closed the folder. And then said the one thing I hadn't planned to. You are not enemies. You are echoes. And if you listen closely, maybe you'll realize the voices you're fighting against aren't each other's, they're your own. Silence. No one moved. As the gavel fell, I heard something I didn't expect. Applause. Soft. Hesitant. Just 3 or 4 hands, maybe from the gallery. Maybe from nowhere. But it faded quickly. Because this wasn't a victory. It was a reckoning. Outside the courtroom, I watched from my chamber's window. Lucas exited first, shoulders tense. Daniel came a minute later. They didn't speak. But they paused, at the same curb, in the same awkward space, like magnets trying to remember if they were supposed to attract or repel. Then Sarah stepped between them. And they walked away. Together? Not yet. But no longer in opposite directions. Back at my desk, I opened my notebook. The one with my private thoughts, the pages I never let anyone see. And I wrote. Justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's an interruption, a pause in the pattern. A quiet refusal to let history repeat itself. Then I looked up. And whispered to no one in particular. I hope they come back next year. Not for court. But for coffee. 2 years passed. I didn't expect to hear from them again. Not because I didn't want to, but because most families like theirs vanish after the verdict. They don't call. They don't write. They either make peace quietly. Or let silence swallow the ending. But one October morning, a small white envelope appeared in my mail tray. No return address. No stamp. Just one handwritten word on the back. Keller. Inside, a single line. We still don't talk about it. But we stopped weaponizing it. No signature. No date. Just that. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. It was, restrained. Tired. Real. That kind of restraint only comes from people who've walked through fire and stayed silent about the burns. The next year, another envelope. Same format. Same paper. This time, 2 lines. We argue now. But it's honest. And beneath it. L. That was the first time I saw a name. Just the initial. But it was enough. That second letter stayed on my desk for months. Folded, refolded, unfolded again. Each time I picked it up, I wondered. What did arguing honestly look like for them? Was Lucas still living at home? Did Daniel ever say the words, "I'm sorry," out loud? Was therapy something they resented, or something they finally embraced? I had no answers. Only guesses. And 2 envelopes full of unfinished stories. A year later, something different arrived. Same envelope. Same ink. But this time. A photo. Black and white. A man and a teenager, both standing in front of a coffee shop, arms crossed, not quite smiling, but not frowning either. In the corner of the image, written faintly in pencil. Not healed. But no longer bleeding. I held it in my hand for a long time. You don't get many moments like that as a judge. Justice isn't cinematic. It's not dramatic speeches and gavel slams. It's paperwork. Deadlines. And stories you rarely get to finish. But this? This was something rare. A sequel. One night, late, long after the courthouse emptied, I sat in chambers with the lights off. The photo lay on my desk. The letters beside it. I reached for my pen. Not to sign a document. But to write them something back. Just in case. Just in case they ever came back. Dear L. I never forgot your case. Not because of its complexity, but because of its honesty. You made mistakes. So did your father. But unlike most, you both stayed. Stayed long enough to feel uncomfortable. Stayed long enough to look each other in the eye. Stayed long enough to write again. That matters. No verdict I give can rebuild what's broken. But maybe, just maybe, it can create a pause. A breath. And from that breath, you've built something. I'm proud of that. Stay honest. Stay loud. And if you ever argue again, argue with love. I folded the letter. Placed it in an envelope. Left it unsealed. Sometimes, justice doesn't need to be delivered. Just written. Years have passed. The letters stopped coming. Not abruptly. Not tragically. Just, like leaves stop falling when winter settles in. And I never tried to chase them. Because some stories deserve to end quietly. But they never left me. Not really. They stayed, in the pauses between hearings. In the way I now look at every father and son who walk into my courtroom. In the quiet thought that maybe justice isn't a hammer. Maybe it's a mirror. I still think about Lucas. About the first time he walked into that room, all sharp glances and trembling hands, trying so hard to look like a man. And I think about Daniel. So perfectly dressed. So composed. And yet, unraveling from the inside out. But most of all, I think about the space between them. That invisible gulf. Wider than the courtroom aisle. Deeper than any cross-examination. Louder than any testimony. That space was the real defendant in this case. And somehow, it was the only thing that truly changed. I've sat on this bench for over 3 decades. Seen thousands of cases. Some were violent. Some were absurd. Some were so routine they barely left a mark. But then there are the others. The quiet ones. The ones where no laws are broken, but something sacred is. Trust. Safety. Love. And we're asked to rule on that. To put language to betrayal. To give structure to silence. No gavel is heavy enough for that kind of judgment. No sentence long enough. No law detailed enough. But we try. Because someone has to. People think being a judge means knowing what's right. It doesn't. It means knowing what's possible. It means seeing people, really seeing them. In their worst moments. Their messiest truths. Their last chances. And hoping they surprise you. That's why I started keeping these notes. Not to remember the law. But to remember the people. Their faces. Their stories. Their half-spoken truths that never made it into the transcript. I call them Lex and Lies. Because that's what most of this is. Law. And the lies we tell around it. Sometimes the lie is in the testimony. Sometimes it's in the silence. Sometimes it's in the parts we refuse to say out loud. But now and then, in very rare cases, something true slips through. A look. A phrase. A letter. I still have their photo. It's yellowing now. Edges curling from years of being unfolded, refold. But I keep it. Because I need to believe that even in a room full of broken things, something can heal. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But enough. So if you're listening to this, and if you're carrying your own silence, with your father, your son, your sister, your friend, write the letter. Even if you never send it. Speak the thing you've been afraid to say. Not because they deserve it. But because you do. This is Judge Elias Blackwood. And these are my notes. Lex and Lies.